So if anyone has any questions or anything they'd like to contribute or discuss, please feel free.
Maybe for a kind of criteria or help, there was one thing I was thinking a lot in the last time, is this notion of wanting. I can make a difference very well between wanting a red Ferrari or wanting to do something where you feel a feeling of wanting. You're not very sure how it will end, and you don't know whether it's really wholesome or not. And it's sometimes difficult to make the difference between this, oh, I just want to get out of here, or I just don't want to get out of here, or whatever it is. And my thoughts went in the direction that when I look around, everything changes. But in this change, there's a kind of structure, or a kind of laws. And all these laws, for me, seems that there's some wanting in it. I don't know where it wants to go, or why it does want. But is it possible to say that this movement we can observe in nature, just growing and dying, there is a kind of wanting in it, which has nothing to do with the craving. I want that now, otherwise I'm unhappy. But is there a positive wanting you can nourish as a person? Or to nourish this feeling of changing with a purpose? Or should you all, as a Buddhist, put it aside as it's all craving? Even wanting to learn the teaching of Buddha is craving.
No, that's not craving. Well, it's a little bit complicated in that we talk about two kinds of desire, okay, like wholesome desire and unwholesome desire. So unwholesome desire is what's called craving, or in Pali language, tanha. And the wholesome desire is called chanta, or kusala chanta. And kusala chanta is an important part of the path towards enlightenment. You can't do anything without it, really. So sometimes we may express that as aspiration, but it's the will towards. Chanta is I'm using it in the wholesome sense, but it is also it is a mental state which can be wholesome, unwholesome, or neutral. So it's basically the will towards. So if you have you're affected by the first hindrance, that's called kama chanta. That's the will towards, the movement towards the sensual realm. Okay, chanta can be neutral, but the particular chanta that we're interested in practice is kusala chanta. Now, to distinguish between kusala chanta and tanha, there are certain noteworthy features or differences. One is that tanha is always aimed at a particular feeling or a particular state of self. So, whether you want a red Ferrari or a holiday or something, it's basically a means towards a certain kind of pleasure, happiness, which may be exclusively just like the sort of animal, sensual enjoyment of it, but there's also tied up in that the sense of self, of becoming somebody or something. This is the way that consumer goods are marketed these days. They develop a kind of a brand, so you buy into a brand, meaning you become one of those people that has that particular brand of handbag or car or whatever it may be. Also, think it's noticeable even in journalism or in fiction of the past 20, 30 years, how descriptions of people have moved away from what their faces are like, their bodies are like, and to what kind of whose clothes they wear, what kind of car they drive. So people became more and more identified with objects and seeking personality, seeking an identity through consumption. So desiring things is one for the particular kind of sensual pleasure of them. But secondly, what they say about you and who you are, and give you a sense of identity, security, status, or whatever. So, if the desire is clearly focused on the results of something you want from that thing, then it's going to be usually craving. Whereas with chanda, it's the action itself rather than the result of the action. And you can see that, I think, most beautifully in the Mahayana Bodhisattva vows. You know, beings are endless. I vow to liberate them all. That kind of paradox, you know. So it's not like I'm going to be a bodhisattva and I'm going to liberate all beings. That's not the bodhisattva vow. The bodhisattva vow is, even though it's impossible, I'm going to try and do it anyway. You see, and that's chanta. You know, when you see that this is just something which is beautiful, which is wonderful in itself. You know, or you know, if you have a child, you're raising a child, you know, obviously, you know, when a child grows up, you want him to be a beautiful, good, noble human being. But that's not, you know, the be-all and end-all of having a child. It's the, you know, the moment by moment and every part of its life, and the whole mothering and fathering of the child, and the relationship with the child moment by moment, good or bad. Or in a marriage, you know, through sickness, in health, in riches and poor and whatever, you know, it's come what may. And that kind of sense of deciding on something, this is good and wholesome and right in itself, and I'm going to make a commitment towards that, regardless, you know, of what comes of it. That's the kind of chanta. So the rewards of it, in the worldly sense, are not important. Now, one can turn into the other. This is why you have to be very, very sharp and mindful. And there are, you know, many examples of people who've started off meditating with quite unwholesome or not particularly wholesome intentions. I mean, these days now that meditation is a bit fashionable, then you're going to be someone who go along to meditation courses because it's kind of the latest thing to do, which is, or maybe that they hope to meet somebody at the meditation course, but although they start off with that intention, then that's just kind of disappears by itself as they actually see what's involved and become inspired with the meditation itself. Similarly, people can start off with very wholesome intentions and chanda, particularly in the realm of helping other people, and then get caught up with power over other people's lives, or desire for respect and appreciation, and all the kinds of problems that bedevil people in charitable foundations and NGOs and all these things. All these people who join those institutions with chanda, basically. They're not doing it because they're going to get rich out of it, for sure. But yet, through a lack of self-awareness, can get sidetracked, and the chanda can turn into tanha and all kinds of worldly considerations sort of gradually take over their minds without them realizing it. So this is why it's difficult, that there's not a kind of a wall between them, that one can turn into the other one quite, and having an unwholesome intention, having turned into wholesome, can go back again, or one that started off well and then went astray can come right again. There is in Buddhist psychology, in the Abhidhamma, there's quite a useful teaching in which unwholesome dhammas are characterized by one or two particular mental states which are common to all unwholesome dhammas, and one of those is recklessness. Recklessness. This is a mental state that the more common translation for this is a lack of fear of consequences. So you have these two dhammas which are a pair, which form a basis for morality, and one is a sense of shame, and the second is fear. So these words are not immediately very attractive, I think, to particularly those of us of Western background, but the sense of shame is the emotion that arises when you see a conflict between your actions and your ideals, and so it's based on wise reflection, understanding of conventional responsibilities and aspirations. Sense of fear is when before acting we reflect that, if we do this, might enjoy it in the short term, but it's going to have this and that long-term detrimental effect on ourselves, on quality of our lives, on people around us, and so on. And these two qualities are what really the underpinnings of sila, of morality. But what is common to tanha or unwholesome dhammas is that sense of recklessness, when your mind starts to say, look, do you really want to do this? I might enjoy it for a bit, but in the long term it's not really worth. Shut up. It's got an override mechanism. That's that kind of reckless, I don't want to know, shut up. That's something that's common to unwholesome dhammas and is not there in the wholesome intention, which we call chanda. So another technical way of talking about it is tanha, craving, those kinds of desires are based on ignorance, a lack of understanding of the way things are, whereas chanda is based upon understanding of the way things are. So, the other mental state which is common to unwholesome desire is restlessness. The mind's not peaceful.
I think I can't use the microphone either, so I'll speak more loudly. When we're talking about being afflicted with negativity, whatever it may be, greed or fear, then we increase the problem by disliking that we're experiencing it and wanting it to go away.
It's important for the recording. Otherwise, the word is
Hello. I was just saying, Ajahn talked about when we have negativity feelings such as greed or fear, but then we impound our mental suffering by being averse to having that feeling, by not accepting it, by wanting it to go away, or by judging ourselves for having it, that we shouldn't have that feeling. So, and then you were saying that in the end you have to say, this is how it is, this is the situation, this is the state, this is what it is right now. So we need to move to an acceptance of whatever it is, such as I'm really hot and uncomfortable, but I'm going to remain hot and uncomfortable until such time as I'm not hot and uncomfortable, which is maybe not under my control. But I think the question I want to ask related to that is, if we sort of have to surrender to that situation, whatever it is, and relinquish any attempt to control over it. And then, does the affliction itself die of its own accord? Yeah. It's related, I can't quite formulate the question, but it's related to getting rid of, digging out defilements, because that's where our greed or our fear comes from. I don't know if you can formulate an answer out of it.
Yes, I think I understand what you mean. Yes, there's this. I probably didn't distinguish clearly enough between what I was trying to advocate and this kind of New Age kind of idea, just be at peace with however you are, that kind of thing, just accept whoever and whatever you are. What I was trying to say was that is a stage that you have to go through. It's not like the end product. So before you can transcend and you can let go of negative emotion, you have to be fully with it first. That if you start off from that point of view of I don't want it or I shouldn't have it, then you'll never get into a position where you can actually relinquish it. So there is this sense of, yes, this is unwholesome, this is not something that I want to to promote in my life, not something I want to live with for the rest of my life. But before you can really get onto that level of abandonment, you have to pass through the sense of equanimity and just being with it for what it is right now, and not saying it shouldn't be like this, I don't want it to be like this, yeah, it's like this. And when you see it's like this, then what next? Now in certain cases, and this is very, very obvious in meditation, merely being aware of something sometimes is enough, and it just falls away by itself. Like when you're meditating, sometimes you're just aware that your mind's wandered off somewhere, and simply noticing that is enough for it to dissolve. But sometimes you have to put more work into it, and in the long term, there's one point is, okay, you've got this problem right now, what are you going to do right now? It's like first aid. But over and apart from that, the sort of long-term kind of strategy of how to deal with things, and that strategy demands practice on these three different or connected spheres or levels, meaning sila, samadhi, and panya. So conduct, emotional development, and wisdom development. So let me illustrate. I spoke about this before in the case of anger. Okay, you don't want to repress anger or say I'm not angry, and just try to fool yourself because it doesn't work, and you just get really upset. But it's not a straight kind of black and white, either repress or express. You can suppress mindfully, which means that you don't act upon it, or when you're really angry you don't say something that you're going to regret afterwards. So that kind of restraint and developing a habit and an ability to restrain when you realize that you're really hot and upset. That's very important to prevent creating very bad karma, which is difficult to alleviate afterwards. On the mindfulness level, again, a point I made just now, that you get more and more sensitive to body and mind, and particularly I think in daily life, body is very important. That you have these little, whether it's a prickling in your calves or something in your hands or something, and oh, here we go again. Be careful. So you can cut it off, you can nip it in the bud before it becomes fully takes over your mind. And then developing this attitude of patience and calmness of mind. Metta meditation is important because with most negative emotions you have a positive counterpart, which is the direct antidote. So another part of your strategy is developing the positive antidote to that negative as a general practice. So reconditioning your mind, into forgiveness, into may they be happy, gradually replaces the negative habit of whether it's judgment and getting upset with people's faults and weaknesses, idiosyncrasies. And then a further part of that is through developing that inner peace and samadhi, where you now have a clear measure of just how coarse and ugly and repulsive the angry mind is through at least for short periods experiencing the non-angry mind, a very pure, bright, non-angry mind, that you have a new perspective on the angry mind. So these are all in the samadhi level of training. It's the emotional intelligence, if you like. These things like mindfulness, metta, contentment, samadhi. And then on the wisdom level, then that's using your thinking mind to sit. And the first stage is really based on pros and cons, looking at all the ways in which you've created suffering for yourself in the past through losing your temper, getting angry, how you've made yourself unhappy, made other people unhappy. Then reflecting on your own life and from people, spiritual teachers or other people whose lives are characterized by great kindness and compassion, maybe somebody like the Dalai Lama or somebody who you find really inspiring, and they say, yeah, that's something that I like to develop in my life. And then using wisdom faculty to reflect on how anger arises according to causes and conditions. Through lack of mindfulness, someone says something, and through a habit, something happens, and seeing how that there's not really anybody there. It's just a flowing process of causes and conditions. And then the highest part of this is vipassana, where you're seeing things arising and passing away in a very clear, non-verbal way. So, in dealing with a negative emotion, you have to cover all those areas together as one kind of holistic, integrated kind of strategy. You can't just say meditation will do it by itself. There's something kind of magical or mystic about meditating that's going to solve your problems. You have to deal with it in your attitude, the way you think about things, the way you think about life, your whole understanding of life. This is like developing right view and samadhi, and the emotions and conduct. So really, just now I was more emphasizing like the basic level you have to get at before you can really start applying those remedies really effectively, and the particular mistakes we make which prevent us from doing that well. It's raining.
Can you say something more about that sort of monkey mind business that goes on when we try and meditate? I'm being told, go back to the breath.
Yeah.
I mean, is it really that simple? Because it seems so hard.
Yes, well, like I say, it is and it isn't. I mean, it's easy to say and difficult to do, as the great teachers say. I think that at certain times and certain periods, that is all that's needed. But you do need more than one kind of technique or strategy to deal with mental agitation. And one analogy that I've given before is like, say, giving up smoking. There's like two two main ways you do it. One, you just stop. You say, right, from this day onwards, I'm not smoking anymore. Or another way is to say, okay, I'm smoking 20, then tomorrow 19, day after that 18, 17, 16, and sort of go down and sort of gradually one by one. So the analogy is, if you're meditating on your breath, that's just like, no more cigarettes from this point on. Whereas if that doesn't work, there's the second strategy is where you take up a meditation object which requires thinking, but thinking in a systematic way. So basically you're saying to your mind, okay, there's this just kind of momentum, there's just, the mind just really wants to think. Okay, you can think, but you've got to think along these channels that I'm going to lay down for you. So this you might take up the metta meditation, where you're starting off with the good friend, and then as the first stage, and then family members, and then close friends, and then people you feel neutral about, and or then expanding from everybody in this room to everybody in Bak Chong, everybody in Korat, everybody in Thailand, everybody in Southeast Asia, everybody in the world, everybody, all the animals, all the insects, all the birds. It's good to have this, to write this all out first, so that you have after a while, of course, it becomes automatic. But to begin with, just having this very systematic way of thinking. Again, thinking about death, about the inevitability of death, the uncertainty of the time of death, the uncertainty of the particular kind of death. Or some people, some monks will actually just create like a movie in their mind, just imagining themselves laying in a coffin, or being killed even. I had a monk, I remember years ago, had really strong meditation, because he'd come from like Chicago, and he'd never seen water buffalo before, and he had all this sort of fear of water buffalo, and so he made use of that, and he just had this developed this kind of imaginative sort of movie in which he's walking back from alms round, and this wild buffalo skewers him on the path, and he's lying there and he bleeds to death. Sounds really gory, but it was something that, using the thinking mind, but very very concentrated on one particular theme. So rather than sort of a point or a mental sensation or a physical sensation, you take a theme, such as loving kindness, as death, or to take, say, the physical body, hair of the head, hair of the body, nails, teeth, and skin, and allow yourself to think about those things. And with that way of dealing with thought, what you find is, if you persevere with this, that after a certain while, the mind just puts thinking down by its. You just, okay, that's enough. I've had enough thinking. So it's in some ways a kind of more gentle way of dealing with thought. So if you're in a monastery, like for monks or on long-term retreat, you find if you just say you just got anapanasati for 8-10 hours a day or whatever, you're going to get stale with that, and you need to have some variation. Whether it's to do some chanting, some devotional practices, but also to have a little bit of variation with loving kindness meditation, body meditation, death meditation, these kinds of things. So you have a number of where you're more aware of just what your mind needs right now. Because I've noticed if I'm on retreat for long periods, in the course of a day, there's going to be a period where I really want to think. I can go hours without needing to think very much, but certainly during the day, some part of me really wants to think. So I have to make myself a cup of tea and sit with the suttas or a good Dhamma book and just enjoy reading and thinking about something which is conducive to practice. So it's not that thought is an enemy, or it's just a natural phenomena of the brain, of the mind, and and it's a great tool. You could say it's a good servant but a terrible master. Usually we allow it to run our lives rather than making use of it. So teaching, like as I teach, or most people, you teach in a group, then you can't be teaching so many different things all in one session. So you just take one thing and teach it. But in actual fact, in a sort of in a monastic situation, then you're teaching individuals more to really be sensitive to what your mind needs, whether it's more sitting, more walking, a bit more active contemplation, a little bit more discursive meditation, more emphasis on the calming meditation. So it's not like there's one size fits all or one technique fits all. That you have a kind of a basic fundamental practice, like say your main practice is say the breath, and then auxiliary practices which supplement that and which are used when you feel it's like if your mind's getting a bit kind of low and lacking in energy, you need some kind of reflection to bring up some real energy, and sometimes devotional practices are very good for that, and or sometimes service, doing things for other people is more useful than sitting with your eyes closed. It's more a sense of what your mind really needs moment by moment, day by day. The thing about monkey, there's a nice teaching Ajahn has about this, and he says that sometimes people come to the monastery, would say, and they say, I'm just bored with the lay life, and it's just so unfulfilling and meaningless and pointless, and they're at the monastery for about a week, and then they want to go home again. So he says this means that the monkey is bored. He says you're not yet bored with the monkey, but the monkey is bored. So the idea in practice is you get to that point where you just don't want to be a monkey anymore. You're just bored with having to be a monkey, rather than the monkey just doesn't have anything interesting at the moment, and it's just is bored through lack of stimulation and excess, satiated.
Thank you, Ajahn, for your talk. I really enjoyed your description of being in the back cave, and I wanted to ask you about the value of sensory deprivation, obviously not on that scale the whole year, but to help meditation practice in creating a contrast, I suppose, with not having any sensory input and then coming back to the real world, as it were, and ask you, on a personal level, do you find yourself going back to the cave when you are sort of unexpected, or when you're just in your normal routine, suddenly remembering what it was like to be without any sensation, and that somehow helping put things into context or to balance maybe overstimulation or over-emotion? The reason I ask is that I've just read a book about a prisoner who was in solitary confinement for many, many months, forgotten in a prison. And the only thing that kept him alive was anger and revenge. He wanted to get the people who had put him into prison. And then later he's punished and he's caught by the bad people and tortured. But he remembers being in that solitary confinement and remembers that anger, and that's what makes him survive. So he's untouchable. They cannot torture him in any way, because he can go back to that refuge of having, nothing could be as bad as, in his mind as that. So I was wondering whether you find that it's something that's enriched your practices today, and how we could do something on a smaller scale that would help us in the same way.
Well, I certainly, I've never really advocated that kind of practice for my own students, for the monk. It was something that it was something that I had in my mind since I was a teenager that I wanted to do, and someday I was going to do it, and I was very fortunate that everything sort of worked out for me to do it. It's not, even as a monk, it's not easy to do, because I relied on having a strong, supportive community of monks who are willing to go on alms round and climb up this rickety bamboo ladder on the side of a cliff and climb down this hole every day. So I was full of gratitude for that, and that was only possible for a couple of years, 20 years ago, and that's never. And as I mentioned just now, I don't know whether there is anything as a total sensory deprivation anyway. You just become so sensitive to the slightest kind of impingement that subjectively, it's not hugely different from being outside in a kuti in the forest. I thought afterwards that if I was to do anything like that again, I would have gone on alms round every morning. I really I'd always appreciated alms round, but the first time I really saw just how important it is for a monk to have that daily contact with the people who are supporting and making his life possible. It's just such a uplifting feeling and a reminder to you of just the sacrifices that people make in order for you to be able to live in this way. And it's just a wonderful opportunity just to change the environment out of the monastery and walking into the village, and it's just really important part of a monk's day. And so I kind of actually afterwards thought that I would have enjoyed the solitude and the sensory deprivation if I'd had an hour or two every morning outside of it as a contrast. So contrast is really the point. And in generally speaking, I think it's the idea of retreat and the idea of regular periods where you just step out of who you are and who you have to be on a conventional level. So just even for a day or a couple of days, you don't have to be a daughter or a wife or a mother or a friend or anything. You can just put that down for a while and just be body and mind, breathing in and breathing out. And that's not always so easy, of course, especially for a lay person. Another way of doing that is today is like full moon day, and it's what they call poster day. And traditionally, people would take 8 precepts for this day and the night, and so that means that village people who take this, even if they don't go to the monastery, like at Wat Nanachat, many of the village people will go and spend all night in the monastery, or if they're retired, all day and all night, so 24 hours every 1 week or 2 weeks. But taking the precepts where they'll sleep on the floor, sleep separately from their partner, they won't watch the news, read newspapers or novels or anything. They won't watch TV. Don't eat in the evening. So that's a kind of a retreat where you're just stepping out of your normal rhythm. So not preparing food, eating food. It gives you a little bit more time. Not watching TV and so on. So it's a more kind of austere, restrained time to spend in meditation and reading Dhamma books or listening to Dhamma tapes. And so even if you're not in a situation where you can physically remove yourself, then taking on those extra precepts, like twice a month, it does. It makes a kind of a special day and a day where it's just a turning inwards day and a taking stock of what's been going on over the past 2 weeks and seeing things that if you're just starting to get a little bit lax and lazy in something or just sort of getting off the track a little bit, a way just to sort of make a fresh start again every fortnight. I think that's good. For myself, that it's a long time since I did that now. So maybe like 20 years. So the memory of it's not that clear. But generally, as a monk, your whole life is a way of developing that. You've got this kind of absolute physical dependence on other people. In terms of every mouthful of food, everything I own, everything, my kuti, everything is given to me by others. So I'm totally physically dependent, and the rules of the discipline forbid me from digging the earth, growing things, even taking a fruit off a tree, or even picking up a fruit that's dropped to the ground on land which belongs to the monastery. I can't do anything like that. So I can't, or if you gave me some food today, I couldn't keep it overnight and store things up. So physically completely dependent, but at the same time like emotionally and spiritually independent. So for a monk, the idea is being able to develop that kind of evenness and continuity where you can still have that same kind of feeling of aloneness, not loneliness, but aloneness and integrity and independence in the midst of a crowd of people, as you do when you're alone. There was, I remember when I was first at Wat Pah Pong, we had a couple as friends of mine. It was an English guy and his American wife, and they were drug runners in Laos for a while, and then the communists took over, so they had to escape, and they ended up turning to Buddhism and practicing, and they came to Wat Pah Pong, and they ordained. So the husband as a monk and his wife as a nun, and they made a determination to stay 5 years, unless both of them at the same time decided they'd had enough. And as these things, 1 year, Paul he'd had enough, but his wife wanted to stay, and then by the time that he wanted to stay, then his wife wanted to leave. But in the end, they managed to take 5 years. But the monk had, a lot better time of it, really, because being a monk, he could be that much closer to Ajahn Chah, whereas the nun section is very much segregated. There's all, you could go 10 years in Wat Pah Pong and never have a conversation with a nun. I mean, you might even get kicked out if you did. It's very, very strict. And so the nuns would only see Ajahn Chah, say, once every 2 weeks when he'd go in and give a talk. So she was, and she didn't, in the nun section, all the cottages are very close together. They're not spread out like the monks, and it's a lot more sort of communal lifestyle. So, this is just background, but anyway, every now and again, she'd just get really fed up and go and complain to Ajahn Chah. And so one year she wanted to go on tudong, like monks go, and go walking out into the countryside with another nun. And of course, this is absolutely not possible. And so she did something which shocks the Thai monk. She said, she sort of told him off. Saying, "Well, look, it's not fair. You had, when you were a young monk, you had periods where you could go off and be alone. I know, and I never ever get the chance to be alone." So Ajahn Chah was sitting there, and it was like I don't know, 50, 100 people around. And so Ajahn Chah says, "I'm alone all the time. I'm alone right now." So that was sort of kind of important teaching for her to see that, that I mean, she had a point really, but in the end, it's often there's just such a vast gulf between how we feel when we're alone and how we feel when we're other people, or how we conduct ourselves when other people are so easily drawn by the energies of other people, and it's so difficult to not to offend people and to be tactful, and at the same time to maintain your own kinds of boundaries, and that's something that takes a long time, I think. Yeah. But regular periods of retreat and learning how to be self-sufficient, and just to be, in the end, to be a good friend to yourself, is really important. I'm living by myself now for a number of years, and I think I'm quite good at living by myself, and basically because I'm really good friends with myself. I like my own company, and also I can live with other people quite well, and so I've proved that for myself over many years of living in monasteries. Whereas some monks who have a lot of difficulties with other monks, they don't like to live in community. And then they find some kind of quotation in the suttas to say monks should be alone and diligent and ardent and so on. But because they're starting off with aversion to other people, that when they start to live with themselves, they just recreate the same problems with the environment, with the local villages or something, because that dosa is absolutely poisonous, whether you're living with other people or you're living by yourself. So it's not the people that find difficulty fitting into communities that make the best hermits. It's the people that are quite happy living with other people, I think, that do it better.
Thank you. I just wanted to ask, I was thinking a little bit about, from the last conversation, I was thinking about thinking, and I'm really interested in creativity and creativity development, and was wondering what kind of the Buddhist tradition teaches about creativity, if you will. If there's, I know like the Mahayana tradition, that there's a lot of debate and such, and I'm just wondering if you can share a little bit of thoughts on creativity.
I think that in Thailand, then, in every Buddhist country, the Buddhist tradition absorbs cultural influences, or you find that in each country certain areas of Buddhist teachings are stressed more than others, and that's due to the sort of general kind of cultural milieu and habit. So in Thailand, Thai is basically Chinese culture, which is very pragmatic and not given to abstract thought. You've probably been around long enough to. Very few Thai people that I know, can really get excited and interested in a conversation about abstract topics. People are very much more down to earth, and it's what is called Chinese kind of style. And for that reason, in the Buddhist tradition in Thailand, you don't find that kind of debate and intellectual tradition very strong at all. But you do find it in Burma, where there's much more of an Indian culture, that kind of very speculative, love to argue the point and about obscure. I have a book about that thick on the meaning of the word dawn. Yeah. This is a big topic for monks, you see, because you're not allowed to eat until it's dawn, and you can't go outside the monastery. So what is dawn? And it's kind of ambiguous in the in the Pali, and so there are people who spend years, arguing about this. What exactly? Just what sort of colour does the sky have to be? Going from this sort of grey, silver, gold, red. Where on that spectrum is dawn? So this is the kind of thing that monks in Burma, but I can get interested in, and monks in Thailand don't. So I'm just making a point that there's not this kind of abstract thing called like a Buddhist tradition. You've got like a Thai Buddhist tradition and a Burmese Buddhist tradition, and it's dependent on kind of non-Buddhist factors as well as Buddhist factors. But if we go to the suttas themselves, one of the key suttas, particularly for lay Buddhists, is the Mangala Sutta, which you may, the Sutta of Blessings, which gives like 36, 37 practices, right from having good friends and avoiding bad friends and things like that, right up to the highest levels of meditation, as being things that give blessings to life. And one of those is to go to visit monks and wise people and listen to the Dhamma. But another one is conversation, discussion, Dhamma discussion. So, and when we read about the lives of the great monks and nuns in the time of the Buddha, you can see Dhamma discussion was quite important. That there's one famous sutta where these great monks would go and live in a forest, and they would not talk at all, just meditate like for 4 days and 4 nights, just come together for a meal in the morning, and then on the 5th night they spend all night talking about Dhamma, so exchanging experiences and discussing the Buddha's teaching. So it's like a cycle of sort of a harmony of not thinking and not talking, and talking at certain regular intervals. So, of course, Buddhist psychology is very complex and intellectually demanding, and I think for that reason it can often sidetrack people, because it's so difficult to learn that it's very difficult to avoid being very proud when you can remember it all. But, as far as thinking in general, we have a word, a Pali, a technical term called yoniso manasikara, which is kind of difficult to translate, and you can see that from the fact that there are maybe 10 or 20 different translations into English. Sometimes it's called wise contemplation, wise reflection. I can't remember all the different terms. So these are ways of thinking that either are intended to increase kusala dhammas in the mind and decrease akusala dhammas, or secondly, to understand the way things are. So let's say the reflecting on metta, as I was saying just now, what we call a discursive meditation, and considering reasons why forgiving people is more intelligent and uplifting than carrying grudges, and considering the fact that everybody in the world dislikes suffering and everybody wants to be happy, and therefore it makes sense to not to create suffering for other people and to try and make them happy, and so on. Then, so reflecting on loving kindness, for instance, and in the reflecting on the dangers and the the detrimental effects of being angry with people on your own physical health, on your relationship. These would be like ways of thinking, which would be called this wise reflection, which are intended to reduce the power of negative emotions and increase the power of positive emotions. And then there are a whole group of reflections which are intended to help us understand the way things are, reflections on death, on impermanence, on suffering, on non-self. So those are the particular thinking skills or topics that are stressed in Buddhist tradition. But in terms of the overall kind of development, Buddhist developmental model, if you like, this is something I'm involved in with the Torsi Buddhist school, and developing a kind of a Buddhist developmental model, and showing the ways in which developing mindfulness and an ability to take the mind beyond the hindrances is an important condition both for critical and creative thought. So the extent to which the mind is able to free itself of its habitual preoccupations, and not to identify with the usual ways of thinking about things and looking at things, which we hopefully develop in meditation, then allows the mind to be creative, and to come up with new, interesting, fresh ways of looking at things. So that's the first stage of thought. Then the second stage, with the critical thinking, critical analysis, is when you evaluate all the ideas that you come up in the sort of the creative stage, and then you evaluate them. And I think if anything specifically Buddhist here, it would be not just a kind of evaluation in terms of, is this possible, could it be done, is it profitable, and so on, but it would also be evaluated in terms of like kusala and akusala. Would it be wholesome to do that? Not just could we do it, is it feasible? Does that make sense? I think when your mind's calm, then and if you're inclining your mind towards Dhamma, then it just seems like that it develops a kind of a momentum of reflection and insight. I mean, I don't know if any of you do. This might not be anything very particularly special, but sometimes I don't ever prepare Dhamma talks. I've been never told not to do that, and sometimes I can be talking then. I say something, well, I've never heard that before, And when I'm talking, I say, well, that's quite profound, that's quite interesting, I never knew that I knew that before, something like that.
Is it on? Yeah. You were talking before about cultural differences and the way people observe their spiritual life, and I was thinking about merit making.
Yes.
And that seems to be a particularly Thai occupation within Buddhism, if I understand correctly. And I'm just wondering about, as foreigners, how we should make merit, or whether we should make merit at all as part of our spiritual process.
Well, yes, and I think one of the important roles and responsibilities of monks is to explain all about merit, and what merit is, and to prevent misunderstandings about the subject of merit from arising in society. This is one of the weaknesses of the Sangha, and I think that's not really been able to get that across. So there are a lot of misunderstandings on the subject of merit making, But merit making is certainly not a specifically Thai preoccupation or a non-Buddhist phenomena by any means. It's something that goes back to the time of the Buddha himself. But the Buddha said that merit arises through three particular activities. One is giving, second is sila, keeping precepts, and the third is through mental cultivation and meditation. And that the merit that arises through spiritual cultivation just so far exceeds the merit that arises from offering material things. It's just a huge advance. The Buddha said that if you were to meditate and your mind was to be filled with loving kindness for pure loving kindness for 1 second, you would make more merit than if you were to offer a delicious meal to the Buddha and 500 arahants. So this kind of teaching is not very well known in Thailand. And of the three levels of merit making, in Thailand was really stressed the first level of giving, sharing, which makes one of the things that makes it for me just such a wonderful culture, the natural and unforced, spontaneous generosity. And that's very much, I think, a result of the emphasis on the first level of merit making. Now, I feel as a monk it's important to be continually reminding lay people that if you make a firm commitment to keeping the 5 precepts in your daily life, you can be making merit, from early morning to last thing at night, even though you don't have enough time to go to a monastery, you don't have money to buy food to put in monks' bowls or to make any financial offerings to any institution. And even more so if you devote a certain period of every day to spiritual development, to chanting, meditation, for instance. So merit is really a name for purification, the translation of punya. Merit is not really we don't have a word in English language, you see. We decided to use merit, and it's sort of as best that we can come up with, but the definition is of that which purifies the mind. So the purification is not dependent on, let's say, how much money that someone would offer to a monastery or something, but really the intention behind it. And if somebody wishes for some kind of a reward from a donation, for instance, then you say the merit is diminished by that. It's not that it's not meritorious, because there is a purifying impulse to share something that one of one's possessions of wealth with somebody else. So that is a purifying impulse. But the accompanying wish to be recognized for it, to have some kind of a reward or some kind of heavenly reward, diminishes the purification there, because there's a desire, there's a wanting there. So the Buddha is talking about merit making, but also the development of merit making. So it becomes more and more of a wise undertaking in which it's not affected or infected by various kinds of personal desires. But I think that with merit making, it is worth considering that the Buddha, in my understanding, the Buddha very definitely did teach the existence of different realms of being, and that beings are born into different realms according to their actions and the quality of their minds, and that merit making does have an effect on your next life, so that people who make merit in what can seem like a very kind of business-like kind of way, I'm making merit in order that after I die I'll go to a heaven realm. That is, for me, no more blameworthy than, say, someone putting aside money for after they retire. It's every bit as rational and reasonable if you can take on board or if you believe that there is rebirth, and that somebody's rebirth is affected by their conduct and their generosity in this life, their merit making. So we don't know whether they're going to live until retirement age, but you think there's a good chance for that. So you put money away for it, hoping to have a comfortable time after when you're not working anymore. And that seems to me the way many people look on merit making. But in fact, the vast majority of people who make merit are not motivated by the desire for a heavenly rebirth. The majority of people that I see making merit in order to share that merit with departed ones, with parents, with loved ones who've passed away. I think that's much more significant motivation for those people who make merit in Thai society. So the Buddha said to monks, monks, don't be afraid of merit. Don't sort of look down your noses at merit. He said merit's another name for happiness. We used to notice this in the monasteries in England, because you'd have in the morning on a weekend, people would come and offer food, and then in the evening there'd be meditation session. So in the morning, all Thai people come to offer food, and in the evening, no Thais and all the Farangs coming to meditate, But the thing that the monks noticed was that all the Thais just looked so happy, and all the Farangs are meditating just looked so tense and so miserable, so we had to start teaching the Thais, to encourage them to meditate, and the Westerners not to take too kind of narrow and reductionist idea of you should enjoy this, and this is something to learn from Thai people, how they just enjoy giving and doing good, and that's a gift and a wonderful thing that contributes significantly to people's sense of well-being, I think, and that's what merit really is.
I remember the first time obviously you were starting your talk that Buddhism is an educational system and it's not a religion in the traditional sense of a personal God listening to your prayers and punishing and so on. What I wanted to ask you, whether in Buddhism, however, is a structure of refined, less refined, until maybe a kind of not personal but absolute, I don't want to say divine because it goes in a certain direction, but principle, showing in laws, showing in something, or is there never a question because it might be speculative, so we do not talk about it because we cannot know, because it's not based on experience? Or is there something in the Buddhist teaching as the idea of an absolute?
Well, in the sense of one way that the word Dhamma is translated or has been translated is law. So the idea that there is a natural law of things arising and passing away according to causes and conditions, and on one occasion the Buddha said that whether or not a Buddha arises in the world, all conditioned things are impermanent, suffering and not self. So it's not, that everything changes. That's just one part of it. It's not just that everything changes, but everything changes according to natural and inexorable laws, and like the law of karma, for instance. I mean, one of the things that led me into spiritual life, really, and when I was 15, a group of us we rented a minibus and we went from England to Morocco and travelled around Morocco for a couple of weeks, and for when you're that age, I'm very interested and language oriented. So to be in a country where I couldn't read anything, where all this, that was really weird and disorienting, and the insight. Well, here's quite a sophisticated culture which is run on completely different lines and different ideas to England. Seeing that obvious to most people already, but it's just a little island off the northwest coast of Europe. It's not the centre of the universe or anything. And so, how can I be so sure that Western ideas, British ideas, English ideas about what's right and wrong, good and bad, polite, impolite, are any better than Moroccan ideas? This was a kind of real point for me that I really had to sort of work something out. And so, is there no kind of universal principle? Is it just that every kind of religion and culture and country just comes up with its own basic ideas that everybody agrees upon? That it's like, but that there's no absolute principles involved. It's all conventional. It's a kind of postmodern kind of idea. Or is there something which is independent of culture and society? And through study of Buddhism, I came across I came to adopt the view that the law of karma is a natural law which is independent of what people think. So, for instance, in the case of, say, killing animals, for instance, there's a whole spectrum of beliefs around this. So, certain cultures and religions then believe that God created animals for human beings, and so we have a right as human beings to kill animals for food, or perhaps they say that we don't have a right to kill them for sport. Or we have the right to do whatever we want with them because we're in charge here, or that killing animals is okay, but killing humans is not, except under certain conditions, except like this and this, or the Buddhist view that all killing is unwholesome or is bad karma, not because it says so in a book, but because killing must inevitably be preceded by the intention to kill. And the intention to kill is karmically meaningful. It always inevitably has a result. And that's the view that I took. So in that case you can say some cultures are wiser than others. Some cultures have belief systems and values and laws and traditions and things which fit more closely to the way things are than others. And so for me that was the defining point where, yes, it's just not a matter of being judgmental, but saying, given these criteria, you're going to say, yeah, this is a wise culture and that's an unwise culture because people are committing bad karma in the belief that it's good karma or that it's neutral. So I would say the law of karma and the way things are and impermanence, the things that arise and pass away according to conditions. Yeah, this is the kind of absolute Now, I don't know if certain theists might say, well, they'd be willing to call that God. I don't know. I think that the word God is just so kind of ambiguous and sort of fits everything according to whatever you. That some people might say, well, yeah, I'd be willing to call that God. Well, then that's okay. We in Buddhism we just like to say like the way things are. Something sort of very kind of bland like that.